Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. We're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA Nations round number 3 highlights, driving at Catalunya in the Group 4 cars. So the dominant car for this race on this track was of course the Alfa Romeo 4C. It was pretty much the only car, if you wanted the best result, it was the only car you could really go and actually get a good result from, because one, it's got the best speed around the track, and two, it's got the best tyre wear in Group 4. So it pretty much very simple. There was no tyre, there was no fuel saving involved for this race, so the Alfa was the best choice to use in this race. So starting behind B race, you can see in front of us there, the aim of this race, with the first race of the day, was to get a nice solid result and try and pick up a base points, so then we can drive a little bit more aggressive in the next few races. I decided to do the 3 of these races, so there was a chance to try and pick up some solid points. I think we actually got disconnected in one race as well, but we would have had a chance to do 4, but we got disconnected in one, which was a bit of a shame. But this race, so starting from P2, hanging on to B racer at the moment, very fast driver. He was actually, I think, quite high up on the top 10 stars. He had good pace around this track, so we're just trying to hang on in there. He looked a little bit uncomfortable on the opening lap. At this stage of the race, I wasn't sure if he was actually on the medium tyres, because his rear looked really unstable. So I think when we were streaming this, we were actually questioning whether he might be on the medium tyres at this point of the race, because he looked like he was getting a lot of understeer and like really uncomfortable with the car, obviously just trying to get used to it, and probably in a similar situation to myself, just trying to settle into a routine. But again, massive oversteer moment where he turned into the corner a little bit too quickly and the rear kicked out a bit. But you can see a train behind myself also. You can see in that bottom right hand corner on the replay camera, 6 or so cars, maybe more, all line astern, driving along and trying to make progress in this race. You can see slipstream's going to come into effect now, so everyone's picking up a slipstream off each other. Although I did find that this Alfa Romeo didn't pick up a massive slipstream off of the other Alfa. If it was an Alfa in front of it, didn't. You can see in front of me, it's not a massive slipstream you're picking up, so it was actually quite hard to get into an overtaking position. And again, that little puff of smoke that we see going into the braking zone, it's a really weird one that I've never really noticed that happening. Must be something to do with the Alfa. I've never really seen it on other cars, but it seemed to be locking its tyres up slightly, unless some people were using different brakes with this car, maybe weak brakes rather than default. I don't know. I used the default, but they were serving me quite well with the default brakes, because that's what pretty much most people use on most cars. Very rare anyone will use weak brakes in the very front of the top split grids, but I did notice it happening quite a lot of the time with B Racer. His brakes were locking up randomly. It happened on lap 1, and again then you could see that little lock up. It was really strange, but it could just also be a bit of a replay glitch. I'm not too sure, because I don't remember seeing that when we were actually live streaming. Maybe someone could go back and check the live stream and see if it did happen, because obviously we were using this view as well, and you'll probably be able to notice it. But you can see now, race going okay so far. We're going to not show the full race again, that little puff of smoke into the braking zone. We'll have to see if we can see any other cars doing that as well, unless he's using weak brakes rather than default brakes. I'm not too sure, but it's happening on the heavy braking zones for him quite often. We'll see if it does it again going onto the back straight. Possibly it's a replay bug. Just some things do that on replays. They don't show exactly what happened in the race, but maybe I'll go back and check the stream and see if that was doing that into the heavy braking zones. But yeah, we're gonna just show like the highlights of this race. We're not going to concentrate on every single lap through this video. We've got three very different races to cover in this video. Race 1, this race, just trying to get a base result in. Race 2, very different from this, and race 3, very different from the other two. So all 3 good races, and very different though. So you can see getting under a little bit of pressure from P3 at this point now, while I'm starting to lose the slipstream from P1. Obviously not really in the rhythm of the track at the moment. First race of the day, just jumped on, I think I jumped on without pretty much no practice again, because I tried to get on for an earlier slot. So I thought, you know, why this situation is like this with the FIA, where we can race a number of times without, you know, worrying. It doesn't matter if you go into a race with little practice, because as long as you know you're going to be towards the front of the grid, you can use that as a practice race, and then in the following races try and get a slightly better result, obviously, and you've had the practice then for that next race. So that's what we were doing in this one. Unfortunately, after this race, so we actually got disconnected in a race that we would have been in I think we would have been in another race with B Racer and some other higher drivers, but unfortunately we did get disconnected, so that was a bit of a shame. But for this race, you can see lap 3, and we're just outside that slipstream, but again you can see that puff of smoke in the braking zone. I'm going to have to look out for that with other cars to see if other cars were doing that, because we'll have a little look through this race now as we go to race 2 and 3 if any other cars were doing that. A little bit of puff of smoke in the heavy braking zones. It possibly is that he's using weak brakes, because weak brakes, they're not massively slow. I always found when I used them, because when I started playing this game I was using weak brakes rather than default. I moved to default because in the majority, well, pretty much every car I came across, it was about a tenth or 2 tenths faster using the default. You could brake a little bit later, so it's possible that he's just used to the brakes and using weak. Not really sure. There's not a massive difference in overall race pace between weak and default. It's just a very, very tiny amount that you can brake a little bit later. But at this point, I seen that he was going to go around the outside. I decided, I think on stream I said, I'm just going to let him have that position. There's no point. I didn't want to go side by side through there, battling away and lose time. I decided to let him go and then just pick up his slipstream, because if we would have gone side by side through there, I think it would have been a very, it would have just cost us more time than it was worth. And at this point, we've got a bit of a gap to P4, so it made sense just to let him kind of go around the. I didn't want to obviously just let him go clean around the outside, but once I saw he was next to me, I think I said on stream, I'm just going to let him go and have that position. There's no point battling it, and we'll just tuck back in the slipstream and just try and make up some time. And we did obviously make a mistake on that lap, which gave him the chance to pick up that slipstream. I was having a little bit of difficulty at the start of the stream on the first race, on the final corner, on the chicane, on the exit of there. Wasn't really getting the power down nicely, and also through this chicane wasn't really carrying enough speed through there. But we did get it sorted towards the last race, where I started to drive much better and a lot more consistent. But you can see very wide through that corner there, P2. When I was watching that, I thought that might have been a penalty, but luckily for him, he doesn't pick up a penalty. But you can see P1 not really pulling away massively. With that mistake I made, obviously it's give P1 a little bit of a boost over myself, but we're still only like 1.5 to 2 seconds behind. It's not, he's not just running away with the race. We're still in contention. We're in P3, and it's going to be down to strategy as well. As P2 now is going to go for, if anyone was watching the stream, they'll remember, he goes for a very strange strategy, and I'm wondering if it's because he made the mistake on the, if you saw, going through the final part of the chicane, he lost the rear, and I'm thinking that he probably thought, it might have been a last second decision to go for the undercut, because he knew with that mistake that I was probably going to get the slipstream and get back past him before the pits. So maybe he thought very quickly, quick thinking, and thought, I'm going to just jump that and see what happens if I do the undercut. So this was when we went in the pits. Now lap later, going into pits with the pretty uneventful lap 5, just following around behind B Racer. So into the pits now. It's going to be interesting to see where he come out now with that undercut, because when we were looking at the maps, he had a massive gap that he came into, so he was able to put in a completely clean lap, which was probably a good move for him to go for that undercut. As you see there, he's now gone past B Racer on the outside, and he's got himself into P1. Look how much he's gained from that. So we probably would have got past him on the straight, so I think he's gained a good 2.5 seconds, at least, it may be even close to 3 seconds there, looking how far up he is. Possibly 3 seconds from that undercut, and it does show you that the undercut does really work, especially when in this situation where your fuel's running lower and you're going to have better tyre wear for the last stint, so they can do 6 laps, as we're now going to jump through to lap 7 when B Racer eventually got past Musto in front of us, and now we started to catch him up, as his tyre wear was, he didn't seem to be coping very well with the tyres. I'm not sure what tyres he put on, whether he put the mediums or the softs. I would presume he put the softs on, because they would easily do the 6 laps. I think we're going to do it in one race as well. You're going to see it after in one of the other races. But you can see now we're gaining a lot of time on him and putting him under quite a bit of pressure now, as we're going to jump through to the replay camera, picking up that slipstream and getting ever closer to making a move. You can see not quite close enough there. He's got pretty similar tyres to us at the moment in this race. So his tyres are not that bad. They're just a little bit more worn. They're 1 lap more worn, so we have got the advantage in terms of pace. So I felt like I was going to get past him eventually. We had quite a few laps to go and putting him under quite a lot of pressure. You can see B Racer starting to pull away a bit now. We were actually matching B Racer at this point, but you can see getting a little bit frustrated because I could see I was getting held up a bit and I wanted to try and put B Racer under some pressure. But this is all losing me time now through this section as we're managing to get a bit of a rhythm of the track now and starting to put some more consistent sector times together, as we're now going to go for a brave move now. You can see in the slipstream we're going to go to the right hand side and make him think we're going down, then just dive down the inside but faked it and then went back to the right, and he totally caught him out, and he got tricked into that one. I was quite happy with that move because I wasn't going for the inside. You can see if I'm going to go for the inside I would have gone across the track a lot faster than I did, but I did it quite slowly to try and make him go back defensive because I noticed he was double defending quite a lot, and he's actually made a mistake there if you look behind in the mirror, and ran really wide again there. So I did notice he was doing a lot of double defending, and he tended to do it, so I kind of was expecting him to do that into the tight hairpin. So he played into the plan and he double defended like I expected to, which was I wasn't too keen on the way he was defending throughout the race, but he did it there, and I just kind of caught him out and went back wide, undercut him and got myself into P2. So this was race 1. Next few laps were pretty static, and we stayed fairly close to B Race. You can see he didn't really pull out much more of a gap than what it was at, and we go over the line in P2. A solid result, not particularly fast, wasn't the fastest pace, but it was a solid result and some nice solid points for race 1. So we come to race 2 and we're starting in P2. One thing we wasn't really doing was hooking the qualifying up. I was really not hooking all the sectors up. We didn't really manage a perfect lap. So starting from P2 in this race and seeing what we can do in this, and this is again going to be a very different race. This is quite a chaotic race at some points, much different to the first race. First race was fairly simple, a nice overtake we did in that first race, so I really did enjoy that overtake. And in this race now it was going to be a case of can we manage to get ourselves into P1 and pull away maybe, or depending on what strategies everyone was on. There was multiple strategies you could go on. You could obviously run the medium tyres, you could no stop on the medium tyres, you could do maybe a short stint on the softs and then pit for the mediums on lap 3 or 4. There was so many different ways you could do this, but you can see straight away from the start, just trying to pick up that slipstream. TX3 driver in front of us got a nice pole position lap. We luckily managed to get P2. I think we got it quite late as well. I can't remember how this qualifying went properly, but again, a very different race to the first race, and the third race is totally different to this race. So I thought I'd do all 3 races as highlights and just explain some of the stuff as we go through the race. You can see behind us a lot of cars battling behind. You can see in the mirror and on the bottom right hand corner on the replay camera, very close racing between P3, 4, 5 and 6 by the looks of it there, as we go through the really fast chicane as he goes a little bit wide. I was convinced that P1 was going to get a corner cut. If you watch that back and rewind it, you will see he completely goes over the Astro, but he loses control slightly of the car, but he still gains. But the game doesn't view it as a corner cut, and he doesn't actually pick up any penalty. And I was really surprised at that, considering some of the penalties that are given out by the game. That I thought would have been a penalty, but we managed to gain time back on the exit. One area we was really gaining a lot of time on a lot of drivers was the hairpin there just after the straight. I was taking a different line to a lot of drivers. A lot of drivers were turning in really early, hitting onto the curb, and as you can see, P1 making a massive error there, hitting the curbs far too hard, but then really aggressive on the final part, but losing the rear. And this is going to give me a run now down the straight. But like I was saying, yeah, a lot of drivers taking a very early entry into that corner and then compromising the exit, whereas I was trying to brake a little bit later and try and square it off a bit more and then get on the power early and get much better exit speed than other drivers. So we're going to go down for this move now, see if we can get past P1. We're on the left hand side. Are we going to hold this round the outside? Is he going to do what I did to the other driver and just give it up? I don't think he is. He's going to brake much later there. You can see I decided to back out of it. Again, I don't want to lose too much time to the drivers behind, so I'm playing it very safe at this stage. I don't want to hang it around the outside, contact and lose time, and then bring them other drivers that are just within us. They're just outside the slipstream at the moment. So what I didn't want to happen is for them to get in that slipstream and then start gaining on me and P1. So you can see battling away at the moment. I'm trying not to make any rash decisions, rash moves at the moment, because I don't want P1 to lose time. But he is driving a little. He's starting to lose the rear a little bit. You can see the rear starting to step out. But that is kind of the way you do drive this Alpha. I did mention on stream, you've got to kind of have the rear stepping out and kind of gliding through the corners. That's why I do like this car. It is a tricky car to get used to, but once you're used to it, it's so much fun to drive. I really like the style that you have to do with this car, and it is really good fun. So now, lap 2, and you can see the drivers behind are starting to fall. They look like they're falling back a bit there, P3, 4 and 5. Myself and P1 starting to pull ahead slightly, but are we going to be able to find a way past P1? You can see we did go for that move. We had a little look on turn 1, but I actually ran a little bit wide out of, this is a perfect example of the penalty system. As we run wide out of that tight hairpin, gained no time at all. That was a penalty, whereas the previous lap, P1 didn't get a penalty, and that's where the penalty system's a little bit inconsistent. And I think that's what some of the reasons why a lot of people get quite frustrated with the penalty system on GT Sport is the inconsistency in it. And that's one thing I think they really should work on, is the consistency within the penalties. If they're going to follow with the strict and the way they're doing the system and like having much, they need consistency in them and proper, a little bit more fairness in how they dished out the penalties. But it's going to be hard for them to program that in with the algorithm. I still feel they should go back to a much more simple way like iRacing. It's so much more simple, no real programming involved. You just don't get any penalties for slight contacts. People don't get slowdowns. You get slowdowns if you cut the corner too much, but just not if you're doing tiny amounts like what P1 did on that other lap and what I did on the exit. But unfortunately, we're going to get a slowdown as we go through to the slowdown zone, which is going to be on the straight after the fast chicane. You can see there P3 is actually caught up now as P1's losing a little bit of time. And one thing I don't really like doing, I seem to struggle a bit when I'm in the dirty air on this game. It's something I've said many times I do need to work on. It's why I try and get past people as soon as possible when I get chance, because I don't really like being in that dirty air. I find it a little bit difficult with the oversteer sometimes, and the braking. I find that I'm not as comfortable as when I'm out in front on my own. As we can see now, I've got to do that slow down for that penalty. It was only like 9/10 of a second, so we only lost 1 place, but it was enough to put me down, obviously, to P3, but still within the slipstream of P2. So hopefully now we can catch up and maybe change the strategy, because like I said, I think I said it on stream, I don't feel comfortable being very close to cars. Sometimes I can obviously drive it like that, but I feel much more comfortable when there's no cars in front. I can see the braking zones are much better, no dirty air. And now we're going to have to consider, do we change strategy? Because now we're going to start lap 4. Was it worth me going for an alternative pit stop? So I was having a look at the map. It looked quite hectic on the map. So we're going to catch the action now with the end of lap 4, and you can see we were very close to P1 and 2. They were starting to hold each other up. I was doing okay, but I just couldn't get past them. Like I say, with this car, it was really difficult with the slipstream. It wasn't that strong. So now I decided, instead of battling these two, I'm going to go for the undercut and hope that I come out in clean air. So we're going to dive in the pits. It was quite a late decision, you see, and I was thinking about it on stream, and I decided let's go for the undercut, see if we can make these tyres work 6 laps. I was quite confident that I could make them work 6 laps, because even though they're the soft tyre, I kind of enjoy driving, even as long as they're softer tyres. On the hard tyres, when you try and extend them, they're a little bit more difficult because there's less grip, but with the soft tyres you get quite a lot of rear grip. So I felt confident that I could make this work. However, coming out the pits, you can see that we've come out right behind 2 cars, and we're going to have so much more pace than these, because one of the cars is a Hyundai, I think, and then we got the Alpha in front of us that's got much older tyres on. So we're going to catch him up fairly quick, and we'll see how much time we lose out to these drivers. And this is one thing with racecraft. This is definitely a video I need to do with people. You see me do it on the early stages of this race, where I let the car just go. For me, in the race situation at that point in the race, there was no point battling. But watch P11 now. He's not pitted yet. He's not racing me. His race is with P10. But look how much time he's going to lose by defending this position to me when I've already pitted. And this is, I know it's racing, but it's not very good racing from his behalf, because he's losing time. I'm losing time. He's losing time. So I'm going to try and hang it around the outside and see if we can get past. But all he's doing now is losing time. We're actually going to get past there. And he battled that a bit, but look how much time he lost. Now, with that, if he would have just let me through on the maybe one of the corners before, he could have tucked in behind me, picked up the slipstream, and tried to use my slipstream to drag him closer to P10. But now, because of the situation that he battled like that, he's actually lost about a second. It might not be much, but he's lost about one second at least to P10. So it's one of them situations where I think if you know there's a car behind that's already pitted, you're not in the race with them. When it comes to racecraft, in my situation, I think depending on what lap you're on, if you're in another situation like this, you're on lap 5, you haven't even pitted yet, then there's no point battling them. If it was the end of the race, you've already you're on a no stopper and they've pitted and they're behind you, then yeah, battle them. That's okay. As you can see now, we obviously Gatos, I don't blame him for not letting me pass through at this stage of the track. It's not a place that he could do it. He goes off into the pits, but I think that the Alpha that was behind us just then should have really thought about his overall race in the situation. But still, we didn't lose a massive, we lost a bit of time. It was probably about half a second to a second, and it's going to be really interesting now to see where we actually come out on the straight as we're going past P2 there. That's the driver who was in the lead, and we've actually got ourselves into the lead now, but we've got that lap over the tyres. So now I'm gonna have to drive a lot better now, but this is the situation I prefer. We've managed to drive that first corner really well. You can see they were very looked like they were very slow on the power, obviously trying to get used to the extra grip, and I've nearly got a second lead already. It's about maybe 7 tenths of a second, something like that. But what I need to do is try and push these tyres now and get out the slipstream. And like I say, one thing that I do prefer doing on GT Sport is having clear air. So we've got a driver in P1 who has decided, he's obviously started the race on the medium tyres, I presume, and he's not pitting. So it's going to be really interesting how fast we catch him, but we're actually pulling away from them drivers on the fresher tyres. And this is showing why I prefer being out in the lead. No traffic in front of me, no dirty air, and I can just drive my own race at this point now and push as hard as possible and see if we can gain any time on P1. And you can see now, looking at that bottom right hand corner, you can see the gap that's developing. I'm still actually increasing that gap, and we're going to go over this corner now and pull out even more, because this is the corner where I tend to gain on other people. You can see the different line. You could see it in the mirror, the way I pull away from other drivers on the exit there, and you're going to see that again in the final race. It's definitely an area of the track that I was stronger on in the Alpha, and it gave me a little bit of a gap between them. For this corner now is where I tended to lose sometimes because I was quite cautious on this corner. I didn't want to be aggressive, because that corner I felt could actually spin you out. We actually did it quite well on that lap, as we're going to go over the line now for our first main lap on the tyres, and we've done a reasonably good lap there, 50.8, and we've actually broke the slipstream completely. And we're going to jump to the midway through lap 8 now, and you can see I've actually increased the gap to the drivers behind because I'm in clear air, and we've caught up P1, who is struggling massively with these worn tyres. We've got good pace at this point. We've just done a 51.4. We're catching up to P1. We're pulling away still from the other drivers behind. Looking at bottom right hand corner, you can see the gap that I built up, and this really does show the difference between my pace when I was in dirty air to when I'm in clean air. So something I do need to work on is when I'm behind other drivers, trying to I think I've got to be a bit more cautious on the brakes, because you obviously got the slipstream, the dirty air, so you have to just try and concentrate a bit more on your racing. But you can see now just how much we've caught up P1. He's obviously suffering massively with the tyre wear. He's now holding us up slightly on this final corner. We're just going to try and take this quite smoothly. Luckily for him, he gets quite a good exit from that corner, considering he's got struggling with that tyre wear. He seems to be struggling on the slower corners, mainly the traction zones, compared to myself. As we go over the line, a little bit held up, but still a 1:52. And now we're going to start. We need to get past P1. Obviously, he's on a different stretch. Now, this again is kind of racecraft. Now, I can understand that he's going to defend this position. He's got 2 laps to go, though, and trying to defend for 2 laps with the tyres in the condition they are is going to be a struggle for him. We're going to go down this left hand side now and try and increase the speed that we can carry through this corner. You can see it going much faster. We're going to go down the left hand side. However, he blocks that off quite late. I actually checked the steering inputs, and he actually goes to the left again there. You can see it. So I chuck down the right, and he tries to cut that off very early. I get the car along the inside. I was actually on the grass. You saw the dirt flying up. You can actually watch that part on the stream live, and there's a tiny bit of contact, but we both get through the corner, and I get myself into P1. However, then into the braking zone, he tries to hold that inside line with them worn tyres. We go around the outside. He tries to squeeze us very wide, nearly off the track. I managed to still hold that wide position. Then I'm actually ahead now into the braking zone, and he tries to brake really wide, and he actually barges me off the track pretty much. That frustrated me quite a bit, to be honest, I'm not going to lie. And it did stop. It nearly gave P3 the chance to get past me. So now I'm going to have to try and see if I can find another way back past him. So this is a driver that we did that move on earlier in the race. We're going to try something similar again. Going to go to the right hand side, but I'm actually going to dive a lot faster down left. And he does another defensive move in the braking zone and actually hits me again and nearly pushes me off the track again. Driving very aggressively P1, and a little bit daft really, because if he would have just let me past probably, or been a little bit more cautious, he probably would have been able to hang on in the slipstream for a little bit and probably save himself from under pressure from 2 cars. Now he's got myself, P3 and P4 and 5 very close behind. And is this going to work out bad for him? Let's have a little look now as we go down the straight. And again, he gets quite a good solid exit from that corner. Luckily for him, he was able to get on the power quite nicely on that exit and work his way down the straight now. But we're going to pick that slipstream up. He's going to try and break it briefly, but we're going to have a little look now and try and fake as if I was going to go for a move. You can see on the replay camera, I fake down that side, then swing it back over to the right to try and compromise his entry into this corner, which it actually does do. You can see we've got so much more grip than me. He's holding everyone up now. Everyone has more grip. We've got fresher tyres. I get the car on the inside. I give him a little tap there, which I think is fair enough. There was a gap there. You know, I've got fresher tyres. I was going through there. Look how close this racing is now. This is intense racing. We've got 7 cars, all 6 or 7 cars, all very close together. We get through that corner in the lead, and as you see there, the car going off, he was the driver who was in P1. Another car has actually bumped him off the track. So this all comes down to racecraft again. Now, I think if he would have just been a little bit more cautious, accepted that he was going to get overtaken anyway, he had 2 laps to go on completely worn tyres. He wasn't going to hold that lead no matter what. I think he would have been able to hold on to P2 possibly. However, he tried to battle too hard. He lost a lot of positions, and then he ends up getting bumped off by another driver in the background. So actually worked out okay for myself. But now I've got to hold on to his position. I've got the older tyres on. Even though I built up quite a big lead, I lost over 4 seconds in that 1 lap when we were behind him. So it shows you how worn his tyres were. But now we're actually driving okay now, and actually got myself a little bit of a gap to P2. So was able to build up enough of a gap to give myself a cushion going towards the end of the race. And luckily still in P1, and looks like we're going to take the win in this race. So quite a hectic end to that race. You could see about 6 or 7 cars going into that final corner on the last lap. But you can look at the lap times on the right hand side, how much they dropped. They went from a 52 to a 56, nearly a 57. So he basically cost me 4 seconds, maybe a little bit more in 1 lap. So it does show you that he had no pace at all, and he was really fighting something that was a lost cause. And in a way, it would have made more sense for him to try and think of his overall result. And I think he could have got P2 or maybe P3 at worst, instead of now I think he's like P8 or something, or P7. P8 he actually finished. So it shows you the difference there. With a little bit of racecraft, I think that he could have picked up P3. So now we're going to move on to the final race, and this race was again very different from the other races. We managed to qualify P1. We actually were in, I think it was actually a slightly higher rated, it might have even been a slightly higher rated lobby than the previous one. Luckily that we wasn't sitting very well in qualifying at all. I put myself under pressure. I messed up the first half of the lap on my final run. However, then the second part of it, you can see it, like I say, you can check out the stream on the channel from this race. It'll be round 3. On the last half of the lap, we actually hooked up the lap really well. I pretty much nailed the last half of the lap and managed to sneak myself into pole position, which was a nice surprise because I didn't think I was going to be able to do that with the first half of the lap. But you can see now, starting from P1, first aim is obviously just to keep them out the slipstream, or try and make sure that they can't get in a position to make an overtake. This is where I prefer to be in a race, obviously at the front and leading from the front with a clean track in front. However, I made a little error there. You can see turned in a little bit too early, got a bit of oversteer and nearly lost control of the car. Luckily didn't lose the rear, held it okay, and still in P1 in this race. But now we've got to hold off from the drivers behind and see if we can manage to put in a really good finishing time. I remembered them in the first race. B Racer's overall time was about I think it was like 59 seconds or something like that, 58, 59 seconds. So that was the aim for this race, to try and get my pace to pretty much match the pace that he did in that race. There was obviously time for improvement. I noticed in the start of this race, this opening lap was very scruffy. I think it was about a second off the type of pace that I should have really been doing on the opening lap. But luckily for myself, I was still in the lead in this race, and that's the most important thing obviously for myself, is to make sure I'm out in front. I said it before in the previous race, I don't really like being in the dirty air as much. You know, I prefer being out on with a clear air in front of me, the braking zone's clear as anything, no dirty air, so you've got the maximum grip and you can just drive your own race. But obviously there's a lot of pressure. We make a little error again on this lap as we run wide, we hit the curb too hard, nearly lost the rear. and we actually let them catch up a little bit there. We was close to breaking the slipstream. I was a very close, I think it was around 9 tenths or something like that, and that gave them the chance to get right back in the slipstream and get within 6-7 tenths by the end of this straight. So not a very good start to the race. Lap 1 very scruffy, probably lost more than a second on that opening lap, but now we're going to try and put in some solid laps and see if we can hang on to this P1 position. Very different races. You can see the way the races have gone. Race 1 was kind of a little bit, there was a good overtaking. It wasn't too eventful. Race 2 was very eventful, a lot of stuff going on, and this race now we're going to be in the lead, and we're going to try and hold on to this lead. Are we going to be able to do it though? That's the thing. We've got VP Doffra and RM driver, who seems to be very fast recently on certain combinations. Even on the P1 race he had very good speed from the other day, which we will be uploading the P1 race and one of the races from Bathurst as well. I'll be doing them into videos as well. Unfortunately, I didn't do the other, I think it was a manufacturer's race that was on when we did the Catalunya. I just did the Nations race, because obviously these seasons don't really mean anything, so I'm just picking the races that I want to do really, and the ones I think I'm going to have the most fun on. As you see, going through that final corner, I felt like that might have been a penalty. When I went through that corner, I think live on stream, I expected to pick up a penalty for that, and I didn't. And this is where it's really strange, because some areas like this corner, when I ran a little bit wide there and didn't gain time on the previous race, I felt like that shouldn't be a penalty. But then that one then, where I felt like that kind of was a bit of a gain of time, because you're extending at high speed, and I feel like that would have been more of a penalty justified than the other one. So this is where the consistency comes in with the penalties, and even when it's against myself, I feel like that should have been a penalty, but the other one shouldn't have been. So it's a really strange situation with the way they work them out. I wish there was more logic involved with them in terms of lap time gain and loss, as we're now going to run on board with P2 as he's chasing me down. You can see I'm trying to break that slipstream, doing the one move to the right and then back to the racing line, and then we're not going to do any more moves down the straight because he's not really close, and we don't really need to go defensive into the braking zone anyway. He's too far back, and again we've got to just try and hold this P1 position and then try and find a way to get them out the slipstream. We gave them the opportunity, we gave P2 the opportunity to get back in the slipstream when I made that mistake from the exit of the final corner. I think without that mistake on the opening lap, I would have been about 1.4, 1.3 seconds clear and just been able to drive my own race. But now I've got to be quite cautious where the P2 is and whether he's going to throw a move into any of the corners and try and get past. As again, you can see he's just not past, like, far enough up to really go around the outside there. So I was able to go back across the line and take my normal line through that corner. We got quite a good exit on the corner there. And now we're going to come into the really fast chicane, where I was starting to get a little bit better through this. So I was working out that you go in a little bit slower and then you get on the power really early. You can see the extra speed I take out on the exit, but then he's picking up that slipstream and then he's going to start gaining on me as the car starts increasing its speed with the slipstream. So now into the braking zone, trying to pick the braking spot is quite a tricky one sometimes, but in this condition it wasn't too bad. I used the little board that they put up, the yellow flag and the blue flag. There's like a electronic signpost. I use that for the braking in this car, and it worked really well, pretty much spot on. So it wasn't that hard to see as well in these conditions, but when it's different times of the day, sometimes it can catch you out and you can miss the braking. But for this race it was actually quite easy to spot, so no real issues on the braking zone there. And I think I'm hoping I've got rid of that curse where we kept missing the braking into that hairpin, because we seem to have sorted it out. We had a really good result in the Super GT race here not long ago, and now we've had some really solid results in this race as well at Catalunya in the Group 4 class. But you can see again he's picking that slipstream up. Is he going to go for that move on the inside? He's a little bit too far back. I'm going to stay left though and just try and give him a bit of space on that inside in case he did. You see I left the apex open just in case he did decide to throw that up the inside there. However, he was a little bit too far back. He decided to try and do a different line and then get a better exit and then entry into this corner. You can see I've actually compromised slightly the exit from the corner because I ran wide. However, managing to carry enough speed to keep myself in P1 as we're coming midway through lap 4. So we're getting close to the pit stop phase. I was looking at the map at this phase, but you can see on the map there, I felt like if I pitted, the temptation was to pit lap 4 again, and if I came out in clean track, clean air, I would have been able to maybe gain 2-3 seconds and get them out my slipstream. So I feel like I was giving them a little bit of a boost with the slipstream, maybe helping them get closer in the braking zone. I think their pace was very similar to mine, but obviously with that slipstream it gives them the ability to make moves and overtakes on you. So it was very tempting at this stage to maybe consider going for the undercuts. Again, I ran very wide out of that corner, and it really is surprising that the game was not giving me a penalty for that. I think because I was really aggressively getting the car back onto the racing line, the game must have not seen it as a track extend, but in a way that should have really been a penalty again, but luckily got away with it for that corner. But you can see now we're coming to the end of lap 4, and I decided not to go for this strategy because looking at the map in the top right hand corner, you can see why I decided not to do it. It was too chaotic. I didn't really know where I'd come out. It looked like I was going to come out in traffic no matter where it was. It was so close from pretty much P1 all the way down to maybe like P15 or so. So I didn't want to risk that and go in the pits and find myself in a lot of traffic. And you know, you possibly could have came out with a 3-second gap in front of you or more, but the risk was too high. So I decided to stay out just like P2 and 3 and 4. Everyone decided to do the same strategy, so it looks like everyone was out on the same thought with that one, that it was too much of a risk to put yourself in that traffic. There is little gaps in there you can see, but it's just hard to judge where you would have come out. It'd be really nice to have some sort of spotter system that would tell you when you would actually, whereabouts you would come out on the field, so you could kind of judge it. But now we're going into the pits, and lap 5, are we going to be able to get, we should be able to get out ahead. We managed to build the lead up over a second, actually got rid of the slipstream, but now it's going to be really important, will we come out in any traffic? Because obviously some people were trying to do that no stop strategy, so this could come into play now. Let's have a little look as we come out of the pits. New set of tyres, and is there anyone going to be coming past on the left hand side? This was what I was really waiting to see, and there is actually someone there. You can see McGann has actually managed to get into the leader race, although he hasn't pitted, but we're much closer now. And I think this McGann's going to be a lot easier to overtake because, one, I've raced this driver before and he's quite respectful, and 2, the McGann's got no straight line speed, so the advantage I'll get in the slipstream is so strong. You can see already, look how much more speed I'm able to carry in. He just stays sat left hand side, he's not going to battle it. You can see how much more sensible that driving is. What he's doing there, he's moved over to the left, he tucks in into my slipstream, he's just trying to think of his race and seeing what position he can get. And that makes sense to me. He's not worrying about battling myself and trying to hold me up. He knows that his race is with other drivers, and that's good racecraft. That's what I'm talking about with racecraft. He did that pretty much perfectly, sitting in the slipstream. And then you can see, even with the car behind, I think he has a little error on the chicane, but then he gives him the space on the inside. He doesn't battle too hard. He's letting people go, and then he's just picking up their slipstream. So while he's doing that, he's actually giving his car a boost in straight line speed. So it's very clever driving from him, and that's what I kind of like to see. Very good racecraft, as we've now got P2 very close to the slipstream after, obviously, even though we didn't really lose much time, I think that P3 actually gained a bit of time on the McGann slipstream and then got past him in a really nice area. And the gap is now about it's probably just over a second, or maybe just around 9/10 of a second, I think it was, if you have a little look on the stream. Like I said before, you know, if you want to go back and watch these races, feel free to go and watch the stream when it was live, and you'll see it was probably a lot more concentration going on my face when we were doing this live. Obviously we weren't racing from this view. I'm using this view for this video just to mix it up, because all the other highlights videos I've showed have been on the other view. But you can see I did go over to the right hand side, which makes me think the gap was probably around 9/10 of a second maybe, and I was just making sure that he wasn't going to get any sort of draft, as now we've got to concentrate on trying to build that lead up so he doesn't get into that slipstream. So the gap I really wanted to keep or maintain was at least 1.4 to 1.5 seconds. And one thing about the way I was running this Alfa Romeo, I was running the brake bias completely to the front. Now I don't think it was the overall fastest way in terms of lap time for when the tyres had the grip, although I think it was preserving the rear tyres slightly, as the fronts were taking a little bit more wear, and it was giving a bit more grip to the rears. So in the traction zones, you'll see that that's where I tended to pull out on other drivers through the lines I was taking, and also probably because I had slightly better rear tyres, so the power was getting transferred to the tarmac a lot easier, and it probably just saved a little bit of rear tyre wear, and I think that's why. Towards the end of the stints, my car seemed a lot stronger than some of the other cars. But you can see this driver behind me, RM driver, is driving very well, and he's maintaining really good speed. He's just outside that slipstream, so he's not able to pick up. And that's the key now. I've just got to try and drive well enough without making mistakes to not give him a slipstream. And you see, this is the type of corner I'm talking about. I take a much different line to them through there, but then look at the little burst of power I get, and it seems to boost me up the track a little bit. as I get much better traction than the other drivers. So they take a much tighter line through there, and it seems to favour, my line seems to be the better line through there in terms of overall race pace. Maybe in qualifying, when the tyre wear's not on and you've got no fuel, the tighter line is better, but I think in the race, taking the line that I was definitely the better way to do that corner. As you see again, just outside that slipstream, he's not really close enough, so we don't really need to worry about going out the way. I think we were about 1.3 seconds ahead, so there's no need to try and lose the slipstream. I can just drive normally now and try and hold on to this win in this race. This would be amazing if I can another win. Obviously we managed the second, we managed the first in race 2, and this is race 3. Can we pick up another win for a really solid result? You can see behind, he is maintaining, you can see in the mirror, the onboard computer mirror is obviously the screen that you've got in the car. He's just hanging on there, as we're now going to skip through to the final lap now, and you can see we've managed to increase that gap to about 1.5, maybe 1.8 seconds, something like that I think it was. If you go, like I say, check out the live stream, you'll be able to see that on there, what the gaps were like. One thing I wish they did do on the replays was show the actual live timing deltas to the drivers behind. Obviously when I'm streaming, I don't record my streams for the sake of keeping the stream running smoother, so maybe in the future when I get a slightly more, maybe a second PC or a more powerful PC, I will be able to record at the same time, because I can have I'm hoping to eventually get a better PC and have the better Elgato card in there. I did want the Pro version where you could record and do 2 separate things at the same time. However, for some reason it was really funny on my PC, even though the PC is a fairly decent PC. But that's something we'll be doing in the future, is recording the stream, so then I can just section off each race and then add the replays into the actual live footage. So I think that'll be a nice little feature to be adding in the future, but for now I'd rather keep the streams running really smooth because they tend to run really nicely. But you can see in this race now, coming through to the final corners in this race, and we've drove pretty much a perfect race. Look at the lap times, and this is a massive mention to how much that other driver held us up in the previous race. If you look at lap 8 and 9, a 51 and a 52.0 I think it is there. So we did a 56.9 when we was behind him on lap 9, and that shows you he was costing us about 5 seconds. So his tyres were 5 seconds a lap slower, and he was battling that hard, and it really didn't make much sense to me to be doing that kind of driving when you've got a car behind you that's clearly got a much better speed advantage. And that's why I think I also, in terms of going for that move, because I had so much more grip than him, I was able to brake so much later. He was on the medium tyres, probably not able to brake as late, and I expected him to pretty much move out of the way, but he didn't. He closed the door on me, and then he started driving a little bit aggressively and lost a lot of time. So that's where the racecraft comes in. You can see in this race everything went pretty much perfectly. We finished the race on a 1959, so I think it was pretty much identical to B Racer's time, so very good speed. I think there was probably people that did it slightly faster time, but I think that was a good finishing time for that race, and we picked up just under 2,300 points in that race, so a really good result, and quite an entertaining day on Catalunya. I really enjoyed that racing. I thoroughly enjoyed the track in general. I liked the Alfa Romeo, so it was good fun to be racing there. And I don't always drive the Alfa Romeo. It's one of them cars that it's really good on some tracks, but not so great on other tracks. But I really do like that Alfa Romeo for us. The tyre wear really comes into its own, and that's why everyone was picking that car for that track. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed them 3 races. Quite a long video, I understand that, but I just wanted to show the 3 different types of races, very different races. Not one race was like each other, and that's why we love GT Sport. Every race is always different. Let's just hope they work on the penalty system and maybe make some changes in the future. Anyway, thanks again for watching this video. We're going to be back with more videos and probably we're going to be live streaming as well, as much as possible in 2019. More videos coming, different games. We're still going to be doing GT Sport as our main game, but we're going to be adding other games into there. There's a lot of games coming out that are going to be different, and there's GTR 3, which is coming out hopefully in 2019, which I'm really looking forward to. The newer set of course is going to be getting its proper release. We're going to be adding iRacing onto the channel, and we're going to be continuing with a lot of GT Sport content, so I'm really excited for 2019. And I just want to give a big thank you to everyone who watches these videos, everyone who watches the live streams, everyone who supported me and helped me make this into what I do now as my main job, obviously. And I'm excited for 2019. I really am going to be pushing the channel hard. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification button, and give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed them races. And I'll see you all very soon. Thanks again for watching, everyone.